Hey guys, today we are going to be evaluating sinusoids, and obviously this is going to take our calculator. So as some reminders, if you see something that looks like this, if it says f of x, that just means another word for y. So if they give you something like f of 2, this is just saying that x equals 2. So when you replace a number, remember the y is the f of x, and the f of something is your x value. The other thing to remember is that if, for instance, sine of x equals to a number like 1, I don't know, some number, we have to inverse both sides of the equations, in order to get the x by itself. So we can't just divide by sine. That doesn't make sense. You have to divide by sine of something. So if we inverse both sides, then we would get that sine inverse of sine x equals sine inverse of 1. So these things would cancel out just like a square and a square root, and you would find that this would be your answer for x. Okay, so there's just some general reminders. So let's jump right in. So what's going to happen is they're going to give you some big crazy equation, and this isn't something that I would expect you to do by hand. There's some crazy numbers going on in there. And then they're going to ask you to evaluate certain portions of the equation. So this first one says f of 8. So remember, if it has the number inside the parentheses, this means that x equals 8. I don't know why I wrote 2. X equals 8. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug in wherever I see an x in my equation with an 8. And when I type this into my calculator, because I could not figure that out, that would be the cosine of 2 pi over 9 doesn't exist. Please first check that you are in radians, and I am not in radians. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I'm in radians in my home screen. So I would have 2 plus 3, here's cosine. So for this part, especially if you have the newer calculators, I would type this in as alpha y equals, enter, and then do the pi over 9, just so it looks exactly like what I wrote on my paper. And then I would do 8 minus 6 in parentheses. Then close both sets of parentheses, so you have two big sets of parentheses in there. Press enter, and you get your solution. So again, biggest thing that you need to remember to do right here is to be in radians, not in degrees. So I would round this to 3 decimals. That's just going to be our general. If we aren't told where to round to, that's where we're going to round to. So since it was a 1 after, that would be my solution for this one. Okay, so the next part says f of x equals to 1.3. So remember, that's a y value. This is me replacing my y value with 1.3. So if I write this down, I'd have 1.3 equals 2 plus cosine pi over 9 x minus 6. And now my goal is to try to isolate my x, to try to get x by itself. I've also lost a 3 in here somewhere. Okay, so since I want to isolate this, I'm going to solve it just like I solve a regular equation. So my first step would be to add or subtract any constants. So I would subtract 2 from both sides, and I would get negative 0.07 is equal to 3 cosine of pi over 9 times x minus 6. Okay, my next step then is to divide by any constants on the outside of my expression. So I would get negative 0.073 equals all that business, cosine of pi over 9 x minus 6. Okay, here's the part where you have to be really careful. This is all in big parentheses. Okay, you cannot just be like, oh, I'm just going to add a 6 or I'm going to multiply by 9. You first have to take your inverse cosine to figure out what this value is over here. So if I inverse cosine both sides, the cosine on the left side, right side would cancel out. So I do the inverse to both sides over 3 equals to the argument, whatever was left in your cosine equation. And so now, if I look right here, this is some number. Okay, this cosine thing is some number. And I'm going to type it into my calculator in order to figure it out. So I do second cosine because it has the inverse on it. And then again, you can make this into a fraction if you want to make it look the same. Negative 0.7 all over 3. So small. Okay, and so I get that this number is 1.806. And you can go ahead and store that in your calculator if you want to make sure you have a more exact answer. Okay, so the one thing though, this is 1.06 radians. So if I looked at my coordinate plane, this would be about 1.5 radians. right? That's pi over 2. This is 3.14 radians. So in between that, here's my angle, 1.806, closer up there. So that would be what angle would get me this particular ratio. So this is the one that's in quadrant 2. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solve this based on that. So remember though, we're looking for general solutions to this. We want to find all the answers. So if I want to find all the answers, I take whatever that value is, whatever that angle measure is, and I'm going to add 2 pi into it just to say, yes, I could find more answers than just this one. Okay, and this is what I've got. So I've gone ahead and I found out all this stuff. I'm going to finish solving this for x. Easiest way to solve this for x, I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to multiply by 9 over pi. Okay, if I multiply by 9 over pi, that will cancel out this part and this part, and I'm just left with x minus 6 on this side. Much nicer. Please don't forget you have to distribute here. So I'm going to take whatever this answer was, and I'm going to multiply it by 9 over pi. I would love to press enter there. Okay. 9 over pi. And I get that that is about 5.175. Now be careful when you distribute into this other guy, 9 over pi times 2 pi n. I'm actually going to cancel out my pi's right here. So I'm just going to get 9 times 2 is 18 times n. That's much nicer, no more pi's. Hooray! Okay, because this is still a general solution. My final step here to get x by itself, I'm going to add 6. Again, we're going to add it to the constant term, not to the n part. The n is just going to be my representation of where the next solution is going to be. So I find that my general solution would be 11.174 plus 18n equals to x. Okay, so that is a general solution here. Now, if you remember when we were doing our general solutions yesterday or the day before, we also had an answer in another quadrant, because if I'm looking at a negative cosine, all students take calculus, I know that I have a negative cosine in quadrant 2, and I have one down here in quadrant 4. Or sorry, 3. That's 3. Wow, I can't count today. So I've got to figure out which angle down there has the equivalent reference angle. Okay, so we need an equivalent reference angle in quadrant 3, not 4, because I can count. So the easiest way for me to do that, in order for me to get from this point to this point, it was 1.806 radians. So if I go backwards negative 1.806 radians, I'll be in the same place but in quadrant 3. So if you are looking for something that is reflected over your x-axis, you can just make your radian value negative. So if I wanted to find for my quadrant 3 general solution, I would just use negative 1.806 plus 2 pi n equals to all this stuff. Okay, again, there should be 2 answers for these because I'm in 2 different quadrants. So now I just do the same steps that I just did. I'm going to multiply by 9 over pi on both sides. And I multiply this number by 9 over pi. It's going to be exactly, exactly the same, just negative. I don't know what I'm trying to do here. Negative 5.174 plus 18n. And again, this cancels out all the gross stuff on the other side. Then I'm going to add 6. And I find that my other general solution is 0.826 plus 18n. So again, for these, you should have 2 equation answers if they're asking you to find the f of x equals. Now, they could ask you for the first 3 positive solutions or something like that, but again, you're looking for your general solution equation first so you can make sure you find all of the answers that you need to. So again, 2 equations will get you those things. Let's look at one that's a little bit different. This is f of x equals 4 plus 3 sine of pi over 6 times quantity x minus 2, and we want to find f of x equals 6. So again, I look and see what I'm going to replace. Because this one is an f of x, I'm replacing this whole thing with a 6. And I'm going to follow the same exact steps that I did before, just some basic algebra in order to isolate my variable. Okay, so I would subtract 4 from both sides. Then I would divide by 3. So I get that 2/3 is equal to all this business, sine. Okay, and again, you cannot just divide by sign. You've got to go ahead in order to cancel out the sign on the right side. You have to take the inverse sign of both sides. So we need the inverse sign of 2/3 is going to give me whatever that argument was, whatever was left over on the inside. Okay, so before we start trying to do any craziness here, we're going to think about sign and where sign is positive. This is a positive 2/3 or wasn't a negative, we'll assume it's positive. Again, all students take calculus. I know that I'm going to have one solution up here in quadrant 1, and I need to have one solution over here in quadrant 2. That's where sign is positive, where your y is positive. So I'm going to go ahead and type into my calculator the inverse sign of 2 over 3. And I get that this is 0.27, I can't read today. So 0.729 is going to round up to 0.3. And that makes sense if this is 1.5 radians. We're in between, so this is what my calculator gave me, the 0.730. So I'm going to add 2 pi in. This is quadrant 1. And then I'm going to set it equal to the other side and do the same thing that I did before. So again, you're just going to multiply everything by the reciprocal. Or if you want to, you could multiply by 6 and then divide by pi. If I distribute this inside, I should get 1.394. 6 times 2 is going to give me 12, and the pi's cancel. And so finally, I would add 2 to both sides, and my first general solution should be 3.394 plus 12n equals to x. Okay, so that's my first one. We found part 1. Now I need to find my answer for quadrant 2. The problem is my calculator only spit out one answer. My calculator told me this angle right here, the one in quadrant 1. I need to look for quadrant 2. So I need to figure out how am I going to get to that side and what that is. Remember, all of these have the same reference angle. So this angle right here is the same as this reference angle right here. So if I think about this, I know that this is pi radians or 3.14. So if I wanted to find out this whole angle measure here, I could just take pi minus whatever that calculator spit out on me, the reference angle, and that's going to get me that answer. Okay, so if you have a quadrant 2, which is going to happen mostly with sine, then you need to take pi or 3.14 minus whatever your calculator spit out for your answer. Okay, that's the most confusing part. You're going to do pi minus this 0.7 thing. So pi minus this thing, 0.730, or else make my calculator do it. So my second part of my solution would be 2.412 plus 2 pi n, always plus 2 pi n, is equal to the other thing. Okay, so again, hardest part about this is remembering that I have to go find the other angle in quadrant 2 by taking pi minus whatever your reference angle is. Okay, same steps that I've done before. I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 6 over pi. Not forget to distribute. And I get that that's 4.607 plus 12n again is equal to x minus 2. Add 2 to both sides, and my other general solution would be 6.607 plus 12n is equal to x. And again, you could find your first 3 positive solutions by using these 2 equations. Okay, so hardest part about these is making sure that you go ahead and you find the second part of your solution by either looking at what the second quadrant is going to be and figuring out what that reference angle was, or by looking and just making that reference angle negative if it's possible to do that. That's all I got.